You may believe that your life is falling apart because you have lost discipline, gratitude, or direction. You may blame yourself for becoming restless in a life you once worked hard to build. The work feels heavier. The conversations feel rehearsed. The goals that once pulled you forward now leave you strangely cold. You keep trying to recover the person who wanted all of this, but that person no longer seems willing to return. What you call confusion may actually be rejection. Something within you has begun refusing the identity that organized your life. It rejects the smile you produce on command. It rejects the ambitions you inherited without examining. It rejects relationships in which you are loved mainly for being predictable. It rejects the schedule that keeps you useful but never lets you feel alive. The refusal is not always dramatic. Sometimes it appears as exhaustion, sometimes as irritation, sometimes as the quiet fantasy of disappearing from everyone who thinks they know you. Carl Jung spent decades studying this conflict between the socially adapted self and the deeper personality struggling to emerge. He understood that a person can succeed outwardly while becoming inwardly divided. The life may still function. The bills are paid. The role is performed. The reputation remains intact. Yet the psyche begins withdrawing its cooperation because the identity maintaining that life has become too narrow to contain what you are becoming. Jung called the socially constructed identity the persona. The persona is not false in the simple sense. It is a necessary psychological structure. It allows you to enter society, fulfill responsibilities, communicate with others, and occupy recognizable roles. You become the reliable employee, the patient partner, the strong parent, the agreeable friend, the ambitious creator, the person who never causes trouble. The persona gives the world a version of you it can understand. The danger begins when you forget that it is a version. You start believing the role is the whole person. You arrange your decisions around protecting it. You suppress every feeling that threatens its consistency. You stop asking what you desire and begin asking what someone like you is supposed to desire. Slowly, the mask stops being something you wear. It becomes the authority that decides what you are permitted to feel. A man sits in his car outside the office where he has worked for 12 years. His hand rests on the door handle, but he does not open it. He checks his phone, locks the screen, then checks it again without reading anything. When a colleague passes and waves, he smiles automatically. The smile disappears before the colleague reaches the building. This is how the conflict often begins. Not with a revelation, but with a delay, a pause before entering the room, a reluctance to answer a familiar name, a sense that the person everyone expects has arrived before you have. If the conflict remains unconscious, you will continue treating the symptoms as personal defects. You will call yourself lazy when your energy no longer serves your persona. You will call yourself ungrateful when an old achievement no longer provides meaning. You will call yourself unstable when your emotions refuse to remain inside the boundaries that once kept other people comfortable. The deeper personality does not always announce itself clearly. It often speaks first by withdrawing life from what has become psychologically false. Your exhaustion may be a protest against self-abandonment. Jung observed that psychic energy does not disappear without reason. It moves. It gathers around what the unconscious considers necessary for development. When your conscious identity becomes rigid, energy is gradually removed from the activities that maintain it. Tasks that once seemed effortless begin requiring force. Social interactions become draining because every conversation demands that you reproduce an outdated version of yourself. A woman opens her laptop at the kitchen table before sunrise. She has answered messages at this hour for years. Today, she types 2 sentences, deletes them, then closes the computer. Her coffee cools beside her, while she watches the window brighten. When her family wakes, she says she has a headache because she cannot explain why the thought of being dependable makes her want to cry. What you have been calling laziness may be the psyche withdrawing energy from a life that requires your continued disappearance. This does not mean every responsibility is wrong, or every difficult task should be abandoned. The unconscious is not a convenient excuse for avoiding effort. It can contain fear, childish resistance, envy, and unresolved wounds. Jung never romanticized it as a source of pure wisdom. But when the same depletion appears repeatedly around the same role, relationship, or ambition, you are being asked to examine more than your productivity. You may be tired because you have spent years translating yourself into a language that earns approval. You learned which parts of you received warmth. You noticed which emotions created tension. You discovered that competence earned respect, calmness prevented conflict, usefulness protected you from rejection, and achievement gave you a temporary right to exist. None of this had to be stated directly. The nervous system studies every room. It remembers the expression on a parent's face, the silence after an honest sentence, the praise that followed self-control. The persona forms around these observations. It says, "Be pleasant and you will remain included. Be impressive and no one will look too closely at your fear. Be independent and you will never have to feel the humiliation of needing someone. Be spiritual and you will not have to admit your anger. Be strong and no one will notice how desperately you want to be held." A young man visits his family for dinner. Before entering, he practices the answer he will give when they ask about work. At the table, he tells the familiar story about being busy and optimistic. His mother looks relieved, and his father changes the subject. Later, alone in the bathroom, he grips the edge of the sink and realizes that no one in the house knows he has been considering a completely different life. The ache you feel around familiar people may come from being recognized only as the person you learned to perform for them. This is why the emergence of the true self can feel cruel. It threatens arrangements that once kept you safe. The persona did not appear because you were weak. It appeared because adaptation was necessary. Perhaps honesty once cost too much. Perhaps belonging depended on your silence. Perhaps your environment had no room for contradiction, vulnerability, ambition, sensitivity, or rage. You became readable to others because being misunderstood felt dangerous. But an adaptation can outlive the danger that created it. Jung called individuation the process through which you become a more complete psychological person. It does not mean becoming selfish, isolated, or unconcerned with others. It means no longer organizing your entire life around one-sided adaptation. It means allowing rejected qualities, buried desires, uncomfortable truths, and unlived possibilities to enter consciousness. The true self is not a hidden, flawless personality waiting beneath the mask. It is the larger organizing reality of your psyche. It includes qualities you admire and qualities you would rather deny. It includes tenderness and aggression, discipline and play, the need for community and the need for solitude. It does not fit neatly into the image you have spent years defending. When it begins to emerge, your life becomes psychologically inconvenient. The people who benefited from your persona may experience your growth as betrayal. Your reliability may have allowed others to remain irresponsible. Your silence may have protected a relationship from necessary conflict. Your endless understanding may have spared someone from confronting the harm they caused. Your willingness to carry emotional weight may have become part of the structure holding an entire family together. When you begin withdrawing from that role, the system reacts. A woman listens while her sister complains for the third time that week. She usually offers reassurance, asks careful questions, and stays on the phone until the crisis passes. This time, she says quietly that she does not have the capacity to continue. There is a long silence. Her sister calls her cold, and the woman apologizes before the call ends, though something in her knows the apology is for changing the rules. Jung understood that individuation often creates tension with the collective. The group prefers continuity. It rewards the personality it already knows how to use. Your transformation forces others to update their relationship with you, and some will resist because your old identity served a function in their lives. The guilt you feel when setting a boundary may be the emotional residue of a role that taught you love must be purchased through self-erasure. You may try to soften the transition by explaining yourself perfectly. You search for words that will make everyone understand. You believe that if you present your truth gently enough, logically enough, compassionately enough, no one will feel threatened. But sometimes the objection is not to your delivery. It is to your freedom. No explanation can make your change harmless to someone who depends on your remaining unchanged. You can speak with care. You can take responsibility for your actions. You can listen to the pain your choices create. Yet you cannot guarantee that others will approve of the person you become. This is one of the first prices of individuation. You lose control over how your development is interpreted. Your irritation may be the return of healthy aggression. The persona often depends on suppressing aggression because aggression creates separation. It says no. It protects time. It identifies intrusion. It notices unfairness. It ends conversations. When you learned that anger made you unlovable, frightening, immature, or unsafe, you may have buried it so deeply that it could no longer perform its protective function. The energy does not vanish. It turns inward. You criticize yourself instead of confronting the person who violated your limits. You become exhausted rather than admitting resentment. You develop contempt for your own sensitivity because you cannot express anger toward those who exploited it. You smile through situations your body experiences as invasion, then wonder why you feel numb for days afterward. A man agrees to take on another project after his manager says the team needs someone dependable. He hears himself say, "Of course," while his jaw tightens. That evening, he snaps at his partner for leaving a glass on the counter. Later, he apologizes, ashamed of the intensity, without recognizing that the anger began hours earlier in a room where he felt unable to refuse. Jung treated the shadow as the collection of qualities consciousness refuses to identify with. Healthy aggression often enters the shadow of the agreeable person. It returns indirectly through sarcasm, withdrawal, fantasies of escape, sudden rage, or unexplained disgust. The anger frightening you may contain the boundary your conscious personality was never allowed to form. Integrating aggression does not mean becoming cruel. It means learning to recognize the moment when your interior says, "Enough." It means distinguishing destruction from separation. A boundary disappoints someone. Cruelty degrades them. Anger tells you something matters. Violence seeks to erase. These are not the same, though a persona built around goodness may confuse them. You may need to become less pleasant in order to become more honest. That sentence can feel dangerous, because pleasantness may have been your moral identity. You have taken pride in being the one who understands, the one who forgives, the one who remains calm. But goodness that cannot include a truthful no is not wholeness. It is compliance, wearing moral language. Your boredom may be grief for the unlived life. You may assume boredom means you need more stimulation. You reach for your phone, plan a trip, buy something, change routines, or set a more ambitious goal. For a few days, novelty creates movement. Then the same flatness returns. Jung wrote about the unlived life as a powerful psychological reality. Every identity requires exclusion. To become one kind of person, you leave other possibilities undeveloped. Some exclusions are necessary. You cannot live every life. But when the persona has made too many choices on behalf of acceptance, the abandoned possibilities begin gathering emotional force. You feel them as envy toward people who permit themselves what you forbid. You feel them as fascination with a career that makes no practical sense. You feel them when a song, place, or stranger awakens a tenderness that seems disproportionate to the moment. You are not always desiring the person or object before you. Sometimes you are encountering a fragment of yourself that never received a life. A father stands in the doorway of his daughter's room while she paints at a small desk. She asks him to help choose a color. He kneels beside her and mixes blue into white, then continues after she has lost interest. When she leaves, he remains there, moving the brush slowly across a spare sheet of paper. He remembers that he once wanted to study art, a fact he has not spoken aloud in 20 years. The sadness appearing in ordinary moments may be mourning for a part of you that was sacrificed before you understood the cost. This grief cannot be solved by impulsively destroying your current life. The unlived life becomes seductive precisely because it has never been tested by reality. From a distance, it appears pure. The career you did not choose contains no boring meetings. The person you did not marry contains no irritating habits. The city you never moved to contains no loneliness. The unconscious often speaks through images of possibility, but consciousness must still meet those images with discernment. You are not required to obey every desire. You are required to hear what it reveals. Perhaps the fantasy of abandoning your work is not demanding immediate resignation. Perhaps it reveals a need for authorship, risk, creativity, or dignity. Perhaps the fantasy of leaving everyone behind is not a command to disappear. Perhaps it reveals how little solitude your current life permits. Perhaps the attraction to someone unavailable does not mean they are your destiny. Perhaps they carry a quality you have not yet developed in yourself. Your fantasies become dangerous when they remain unconscious, because then they possess you. When examined honestly, they can become information. Your loneliness may come from being surrounded while remaining unseen. The persona can create impressive forms of connection. People may admire you, trust you, seek your advice, invite you everywhere, and still never encounter the deeper person. They interact with the qualities you make available. You perform competence, humor, steadiness, sensuality, intelligence, or care. The exchange is real, but incomplete. Over time, admiration begins to feel strangely insulting. Compliments land on the mask. Affection feels conditional, even when no condition is consciously stated. You may accuse others of failing to know you while carefully hiding whatever would make knowledge possible. A woman sits at a restaurant, surrounded by friends, celebrating her promotion. Everyone raises a glass and praises her determination. She laughs at the right moments and thanks them. In the restroom, she stares at her reflection and whispers that she does not want the job. Then she returns to the table before anyone notices she was gone. Jung recognized that identification with the persona creates a painful contradiction. The more successfully you are known through the mask, the more invisible the rest of you can feel. The loneliness you cannot explain may be the consequence of receiving love through an identity you no longer inhabit. To become visible, you must risk being seen inaccurately. You must reveal something before knowing how it will be received. This may begin with a sentence that trembles in your mouth. I do not agree. I am not happy. I need time alone. I want something different. I cannot keep being this person for you. You may discover that some relationships become more real. You may also discover that others were organized entirely around your performance. Both discoveries hurt. The collapse of motivation may be the collapse of a borrowed future. For years, your goals may have given life a clear structure. Reach the next level. Earn more. Become respected. Build the relationship. Buy the home. Prove the doubters wrong. Become the version of yourself no one can dismiss. These goals can produce enormous energy because they promise more than achievement. They promise psychological repair. You imagine that success will silence shame, secure belonging, reverse humiliation, or justify your existence. The future becomes a courtroom where you expect to win the case for your worth. Then you achieve something, or move close enough to see it clearly, and the promise weakens. Jung understood that the first half of life is often devoted to adaptation, establishment, and the construction of ego identity. You develop skills, you secure a place in the world, you learn to act, but the values that build the first half cannot always guide the second. At some point, expansion without inward meaning becomes repetition. A man refreshes the dashboard showing his business revenue. The number has risen beyond the target he wrote down 2 years earlier. He takes a screenshot, sends it to a friend, and waits for the expected excitement. When the reply arrives, he places the phone face down. Within minutes, he is searching for a larger target because the current one has failed to transform how he feels inside. The ambition losing its grip may have been carrying a burden no achievement could fulfill. This can terrify you. Without the old future, you do not know how to organize your days. You may fear that releasing the ambition means becoming passive, mediocre, or irrelevant. Yet there is a difference between losing ambition and losing possession by ambition. A goal can remain meaningful without serving as evidence that you deserve to exist. The deeper self does not necessarily ask you to abandon success. It asks whether success belongs to you. It asks whether the pursuit expresses your nature or protects you from meeting it. It asks what remains when no one is watching, praising, envying, or doubting you. Your anxiety may come from standing between identities. You are no longer fully convinced by the old persona, but the new form has not stabilized. You cannot return to innocence because you have seen the performance. You cannot move forward confidently because you do not yet know who you are without it. This is a psychologically exposed position. Jung's work on transformation repeatedly returned to the necessity of the in-between. Old structures dissolve before new ones become visible. The ego experiences this as danger because it prefers a painful identity to no identity at all. At least the old role offers instructions. You know what to wear, what to say, what to pursue, and how to measure whether you are succeeding. The emerging self offers no such immediate certainty. A woman removes several dresses from her wardrobe and places them on the bed. Each one belongs to a version of her life she can still perform convincingly. She tries one on, studies herself in the mirror, then takes it off without knowing why. By evening, the clothes remain scattered across the room. She sits among them wearing an old shirt, unable to decide what feels like hers. The uncertainty you are experiencing may be the honest emptiness that appears when inherited answers stop speaking for you. You will be tempted to fill that emptiness quickly. A new identity can become another persona before it has had time to become true. You may announce a transformation, adopt new language, join a new community, change your appearance, or build a story about awakening. These changes are not necessarily false, but they can become defenses against the vulnerability of not knowing. The ego would rather become the healed one, the awakened one, the independent one, or the authentic one, than remain in contact with ambiguity. Individuation is not the replacement of a bad mask with a more flattering mask. It is the development of a conscious relationship with every mask you wear. You still need roles. You still answer to a name. You still participate in work, family, friendship, and society. The difference is that you no longer mistake the role for the source of your being. You can perform competence without exiling confusion. You can care for others without denying your limits. You can succeed without using success to cover shame. You can be loved without presenting the same face in every room. But there is a truth beneath all of this that you may still be avoiding. Your persona did not create this life alone. You participated. It is comforting to imagine that society, family, partners, employers, or circumstance forced you into every false position. Sometimes they did exert real pressure. Sometimes honesty carried consequences you were not equipped to bear. Your adaptation deserves compassion, but compassion becomes another defense when it removes responsibility. There were moments when you knew. A sensation tightened in your body before you said yes. A thought appeared before you accepted the promotion, entered the relationship, stayed silent, or abandoned the desire. You dismissed it because the alternative threatened security, belonging, status, or the image you had worked to maintain. You may have called the decision maturity. You may have called it loyalty. You may have called it patience, practicality, forgiveness, discipline, or faith. Yet somewhere beneath the respectable language, you understood that you were trading a piece of inner truth for protection. The deepest cost is not that others misunderstood you. It is that you repeatedly helped them misunderstand you. You taught people that you needed less than you did. You rewarded them for ignoring signals you refused to state clearly. You accepted praise for a strength that was slowly destroying you. You built relationships on agreements your true self never signed, then resented others for expecting you to honor them. This does not make you guilty of having a persona. It makes you responsible for what happens after you recognize it. Awareness removes certain forms of innocence. Once you know that your body contracts around a commitment, you cannot pretend the contract is psychologically neutral. Once you know that a relationship depends on your silence, you cannot call the silence peace. Once you know that your ambition is organized around proving your worth, you cannot pursue it in exactly the same way without deepening the wound. The choice before you may cost something real. Truth may cost approval. A boundary may cost closeness. A change in direction may cost status. Rest may cost the fantasy that your value comes from endurance. Honesty may cost the identity of being good. A more authentic life may cost the admiration you earned through self-denial. You cannot integrate the true self while demanding that nothing external change. This is where many people retreat. They enjoy the language of authenticity, but resist its consequences. They want inner freedom while preserving every arrangement built on inner captivity. They want to be fully known without disappointing anyone. They want a new life that does not disturb the old one. The psyche does not negotiate on those terms forever. What remains unconscious first appears as discomfort, then repetition, then symptom, then crisis. Not because the psyche is punishing you, but because what is excluded from consciousness must find another way to influence the life. The question is not whether your persona will be challenged. It already is. The question is whether you will participate consciously in the transformation, or wait until your inner conflict makes participation unavoidable. You are allowed to stop forcing devotion to a life that only your old identity understands. You are allowed to stop explaining every change as a temporary problem to be corrected. You are allowed to admit that some of your exhaustion contains intelligence. You are allowed to listen when joy disappears from a goal, when resentment enters a relationship, when silence becomes heavier than conflict. You are also allowed to move slowly. The rejection you feel does not require immediate destruction. You do not have to quit, leave, confess, relocate, or reinvent yourself tonight. Urgency can be another form of escape. The task is not to create dramatic evidence of transformation. The task is to stop lying about what you already know. You can remain with the discomfort long enough to hear its exact message. Perhaps the job is not wrong, but the way you disappear inside it is. Perhaps the relationship is not empty, but the role you perform within it is. Perhaps the ambition is not false, but the shame driving it must be confronted. Perhaps solitude is not the answer, but you need enough silence to separate your own voice from the expectations you have internalized. The true self does not always demand a different world. Sometimes it demands a different relationship to the world you already inhabit. You are permitted to become less recognizable to those who knew only your adaptation. You are permitted to disappoint the image that once protected you. You are permitted to feel grief for the years spent maintaining it. You are permitted to honor the persona for helping you survive without allowing it to govern the rest of your life. The mask does not have to be destroyed. It has to be put back in its proper place. It can become an instrument rather than a prison. You can use it consciously when a role is required, then remove it when the moment has passed. You can be professional without becoming a function. You can be loving without becoming available for endless consumption. You can be strong without treating vulnerability as failure. You can belong without offering your entire personality as payment. The life your persona created may not be collapsing because you failed to appreciate it. It may be losing its authority because the person who built it is no longer the whole person you are capable of becoming. Your true self is not rejecting life itself. It is rejecting the demand that you remain divided in order to keep your life unchanged. What feels like disorientation may be the first honest movement toward an existence in which you no longer have to disappear to remain included. If this resonates, subscribe to The Waking Shadow, where you explore Carl Jung's psychology and the difficult path of becoming whole. Watch the video on your screen now to go deeper into the moment when the old identity falls away and the individuation process truly begins.